Brainwashing. In today's world, we see many people so brainwashed that they may seem completely disconnected from reality. They believe the unbelievable, defend the indefensible, and reject even the most obvious truths. But how does someone get to this point? What exactly is brainwashing? And what are the practical steps that make such a radical transformation possible? Brainwashing isn't just an idea from dystopian fiction. It's one of the most powerful and effective psychological manipulations in history. And the terrifying part? No one is truly immune to it. One of the most chilling real-world examples, the Jonestown Massacre. In 1978, over 900 people, including children, died after drinking cyanide-laced punch under the orders of cult leader Jim Jones. This wasn't a group of people who suddenly decided to follow a madman. They were conditioned, step by step, until their critical thinking was completely overridden. They truly believed they were making their own choices. That's the power of brainwashing. It doesn't force you to change. It makes you want to. So how does it actually happen? It follows a pattern: isolation, destabilization, indoctrination, and reinforcement. A process so effective that once it takes hold, escaping feels impossible. The first step is isolation. When you control the information someone has access to, you control their perception of reality. Jim Jones did this by moving his followers to a remote compound in Guyana, cutting them off from outside influences. In everyday life, this happens in media bubbles, extremist groups, and even in toxic relationships, where only one perspective is constantly reinforced. The more someone's worldview is shaped by a single source, the less they question it. Next comes destabilization, breaking down a person's mental defenses. This is done through exhaustion, fear, and confusion. Cults use long sermons, erratic punishments, and emotional breakdowns. Governments use constant crisis narratives, making people feel like the world is too chaotic to understand without their guidance. The more mentally drained someone becomes, the more they rely on the manipulator to make sense of things for them. Then comes indoctrination, implanting new beliefs. The key here is reward and punishment cycles. If you conform, you're praised. If you question, you're punished. In cults, doubting the leader means exile. In real life, questioning certain ideologies can get you socially ostracized. Over time, this conditioning rewires the brain, making the new belief feel natural, even when it was forced upon you. Finally, there's reinforcement. Once brainwashing is complete, the new identity is constantly reinforced through rituals, groupthink, and identity-based loyalty. People stop questioning because their beliefs are now tied to their sense of self. They don't feel brainwashed, they feel enlightened. And that's the scariest part. Brainwashing doesn't feel like brainwashing when it's happening to you. It feels like truth. That's why people stay in abusive groups, fall for mass manipulation, and follow ideologies to extremes without ever questioning them. So how do you protect yourself? The first step is awareness. Brainwashing works by making critical thinking feel unnecessary or even dangerous. The moment you feel pressured not to question something, that's a red flag. The second step is exposure to multiple perspectives. If you only ever hear one side of a story, you are being controlled, even if you don't realize it. And the third step, pay attention to emotional manipulation. Fear, guilt, outrage. These are the tools used to override logic. Whenever your emotions are being used to shape your beliefs, stop and ask yourself, who benefits from me thinking this way? Because once your mind is rewritten, you won't even realize it happened. What happens if someone keeps telling you that you're insane? At first, you'd reject it. You know who you are. You trust your own mind. But over time, something shifts. Maybe you are a difficult person. Maybe you do overreact. Maybe you're not as rational as you thought. And if enough doubt creeps in, you might start believing the one thing you never thought possible. Maybe they're right. This is gaslighting, a psychological weapon designed to make you question your own perception of reality. It's not just lying. It's erasing truth itself and replacing it with something more convenient for the manipulator. And the worst part, by the time you realize what's happening, if you ever do, you're already trapped. The term comes from a 1944 film, Gaslight, where a husband slowly convinces his wife that she's losing her mind. He dims the lights in their home, then denies that anything has changed when she notices. The goal? To make her doubt herself so completely that she becomes dependent on him. But this isn't just a movie trope. It's a real-world manipulation tactic used in toxic relationships, cults, politics, and even corporations. Gaslighting works because it destabilizes reality itself. It starts subtly. The manipulator denies things they've said or done, even when there's proof. I never said that. You're making things up. At first, you argue back. But over time, hearing the same denials over and over chips away at your confidence. Next, they attack your ability to think clearly. You're always so dramatic. You overanalyze everything. Soon, you start doubting your own judgment, convincing yourself that maybe you are the problem. Then comes emotional manipulation. Any reaction you have is dismissed. Why are you so sensitive? You always blow things out of proportion. The goal is to make you question your right to feel the way you do. Eventually, you start second-guessing your own emotions, apologizing when you shouldn't. And then, the final step, isolation. Gaslighters don't want you hearing outside perspectives, so they slowly cut you off from other influences. They tell you your friends are making you paranoid, that your family doesn't really understand you. Bit by bit, they become the sole authority on what's real. At this stage, they don't need to manipulate you anymore. You do it to yourself. You stop questioning them. You silence your own doubts before they even have a chance to surface. You accept their version of events, not because you want to, but because your mind no longer trusts itself to disagree. Gaslighting is terrifying because it doesn't just manipulate your thoughts, it rewrites who you are. It makes you abandon yourself, handing over control to someone else without even realizing it. And by the time you finally see the truth, if you ever do, it feels impossible to break free. Because how do you fight back when you don't even know what's real anymore? Stockholm Syndrome. There's a moment in every hostage situation where the victim should fear their captor, hate them, fight them, do whatever it takes to escape. But sometimes, something strange happens instead. The victim starts defending them, trusting them, even loving them. It sounds impossible, but it's not. The name Stockholm Syndrome comes from a 1973 bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden. 4 hostages were locked inside a vault for 6 days, terrified and powerless. When the police finally rescued them, something bizarre happened. Instead of thanking their saviors, the hostages defended their captors. One even raised money for their legal defense. The world was baffled. How could victims side with the very people who threatened their lives? But this wasn't an isolated case. It happens in kidnappings, cults, abusive relationships, even prisoner of war camps. And the reason why is terrifying. Stockholm Syndrome isn't about weakness. It's about survival. When a person is trapped and powerless, their brain stops looking for ways to fight and starts looking for ways to cope. The captor controls everything: food, movement, even whether they live or die. And in that situation, the mind does something disturbing. It rewires fear into attachment. It starts with small acts of mercy. A kidnapper allows their hostage to eat. An abuser apologizes after an outburst. A cult leader offers protection from an outside threat. These tiny gestures create a twisted reality. The victims start seeing their captor as their savior, not their oppressor. Because when someone is both the source of your fear and your comfort, your mind clings to the comfort. Then comes isolation. The victim is cut off from the outside world, forced to rely only on their captor's words. Over time, their own sense of self erodes. They stop questioning. They start justifying. This is why abuse victims often defend their abusers, why hostages sometimes refuse to escape, even when given the chance. It's not about logic. It's about survival. And finally, Dependency locks the victim into place. When their only way to stay safe is to keep their captor happy, they stop resisting. They start working for them instead of against them. They might even feel gratitude, loyalty, love. This is why Stockholm Syndrome is so terrifying. It proves just how fragile human perception can be. The mind will betray itself to survive, twisting reality until captors become protectors and victims defend their own suffering. And the worst part? Most people don't even realize it's happening until it's too late. Cultivating dependence. There's a reason cult leaders, abusive partners, and authoritarian regimes rarely use physical chains. They don't need to. The most effective way to control someone isn't to lock them up. It's to make them believe they can't survive without you. This is the dark art of engineered dependence, a psychological trick designed to make people abandon their own independence, willingly handing over control to someone else. And it works because it taps into something fundamental: the human need for connection. It starts with removing options one by one, not through force, but through subtle manipulation. A partner insists, "Your friends don't really care about you." A group warns, "Your family is toxic. You need to cut them out." A leader whispers, "Only we know the truth. The outside world is dangerous." At first, it feels like a suggestion, but soon it becomes a rule, then a belief, until one day you look around and realize there's no one left. Once isolation is complete, dependence takes over. The manipulator becomes the only source of validation, approval, security, even basic needs. They create problems only they can solve. They withhold kindness until obedience is guaranteed. In extreme cases, they control finances, decisions, even movement. The victim stops making choices for themselves, not because they don't want to, but because they've been conditioned to believe they can't. And here's the cruelest part. The victim thinks it's their choice. They aren't locked away. They aren't physically restrained, but they stay. Because their world has been rewritten so completely that leaving feels like stepping off a cliff. This method has been used throughout history. Cults sever members from friends and family, making the leader their only trusted source of truth. Abusive partners erode self-confidence until their victim believes they are nothing without them. Totalitarian governments censor information, ensuring their citizens feel powerless without the system that controls them. And once someone has been broken down like this, they don't need to be forced to stay. They will choose to. Even when escape is possible, even when the doors are wide open, they hesitate. Because when your identity has been shaped around someone else's control, freedom doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like a threat. Learned helplessness. In 1973, Patty Hearst, a wealthy heiress, was kidnapped by a militant group called the Symbionese Liberation Army. At first, she resisted. She was beaten, locked in a dark closet, and isolated for weeks. But then, something terrifying happened. Months later, she was seen holding a gun, robbing a bank alongside her captors. The world was stunned. How does someone go from being a victim to willingly committing crimes with the very people who tortured them? This wasn't just a hostage situation. It was a textbook case of psychological breakdown. It starts with breaking a person down. When someone is placed in a situation where they experience repeated punishment, failure, or isolation, their mind adapts in a disturbing way. They stop seeing escape as an option. Even when the door is wide open, they don't run. This isn't just a theory. Psychologists first discovered it in an experiment with dogs. They placed the animals in cages with electric floors. At first, the dogs tried to escape, but after being shocked repeatedly with no way out, they gave up. And here's the terrifying part. When the cage door was finally opened, they still didn't leave. They had learned helplessness. This is what makes victims of manipulation stay, even when a way out exists. How does this happen to people? It begins with unpredictable reward and punishment. One day, the captor is kind. The next, they're cruel. The victim never knows what to expect. Their brain becomes stuck in survival mode, too exhausted to fight back. Then comes self-doubt. The manipulator chips away at the victim's ability to think for themselves. They're told they're weak, foolish, incapable. Slowly, their confidence erodes to nothing. Eventually, they begin to believe they need their abuser to survive. Next is isolation. Friends, family, outside perspectives, all cut off. Without anyone to remind them of who they were before, their world shrinks. Their thoughts become controlled by their captor. And finally, forced dependence. The victim relies on their abuser for food, shelter, even basic human connection. By this stage, they might not just accept their captivity, they might defend it. Just like Patty Hearst did, they don't just stay. They become active participants in their own entrapment. This is why people remain in abusive relationships. Why prisoners of war form emotional bonds with their captors. And why high control groups keep their members submissive. It's not weakness. It's not stupidity. It's survival. The brain prioritizes safety over freedom. When someone is trained to believe escape is impossible, they won't even try. And that's what makes learned helplessness so terrifying. The most dangerous thing a manipulator steals isn't someone's freedom. It's their belief that freedom was ever possible in the first place. Memory manipulation. What if I told you that some of your memories, the moments you swear happened exactly as you recall, might be completely false? That someone could plant a memory in your mind, and you would believe it just as firmly as your real experiences. It sounds like science fiction. But in reality, memory is one of the most fragile, easily manipulated aspects of the human mind. And that makes it a perfect tool for control. Take the infamous Lost in the Mall experiment by psychologist Elizabeth Loftus. Participants were told stories about their childhood, some real, some completely fabricated. One of them was simple. As a child, they had once been lost in a shopping mall. At first, the subjects had no memory of this, but after repeated questioning and subtle suggestions, many of them began remembering details. Who found them? What the mall looked like? How they felt? They swore it had happened, even though it never did. Their minds had filled in the blanks, constructing a completely false memory. This wasn't just people misremembering. This was memory being rewritten. Our brains don't store memories like a camera, capturing moments in perfect clarity. Instead, every time we recall an event, we reconstruct it, pulling together fragments, filling in gaps, and, without realizing it, changing the details. And here's the terrifying part. The more you recall a memory, the less accurate it becomes. This means that, with the right influence, someone can alter your past. They can change how you remember events, reshape your emotions, and even convince you of things that never happened. One of the easiest ways to manipulate memory is through suggestion. A simple phrase like, "Are you sure that's what happened?" Or "I remember it differently" introduces doubt. Your brain, wanting to maintain consistency, starts adjusting its recall to match the new version of events. Over time, you adopt the false memory as your own. Then comes reinforcement. If multiple people confirm the false memory, whether they're lying or just misremembering, it becomes reality. Social agreement is one of the most powerful tools for shaping memory because the brain values collective certainty over individual doubt. If everyone else remembers it that way, maybe you're the one who's wrong. And this isn't just some harmless quirk of the mind. History has seen terrifying uses of memory manipulation. False confessions in criminal cases have been extracted by police interrogators, reconstructing events until the accused believes in their own guilt. In abusive relationships, manipulative partners rewrite history, convincing victims they were at fault for things they never did. Governments and propaganda machines have altered historical narratives, reshaping public perception to serve their agendas. Memory is the foundation of identity. It shapes who we are, what we believe, and how we see the world. But what happens when someone else takes control of it? If your past can be rewritten, then so can your future. And by the time you realize your mind has been altered, if you ever do, it's already too late. Triangulation, a psychological trick so subtle it can turn the most confident person into an anxious wreck. It makes people question their worth, their relationships, and even their grip on reality, without them ever realizing it's happening. This is triangulation and jealousy induction, one of the most effective manipulation tactics used in toxic relationships, workplaces, and even politics. At its core, triangulation is about introducing a third person, real or imagined, into a dynamic to create tension, competition, or insecurity. It's a classic move in manipulative relationships. A controlling partner casually mentions how attractive or successful someone else is. They compare their victim to an ex, implying they aren't measuring up. Sometimes, they even fabricate outside interest just to provoke a reaction. It doesn't seem like direct manipulation at first. It's just a comment, just a story, just a harmless observation. But over time, it changes everything. Because the victim starts to compete for validation. They feel replaceable. They work harder to prove themselves. They stop focusing on whether the relationship is healthy and start obsessing over how to be good enough. Jealousy induction is the next step. Instead of just mentioning a third party, the manipulator actively stirs doubt and insecurity. They flirt in front of their partner. They praise someone else excessively. They make sure their victim sees the attention they supposedly receive. And with every calculated move, the victim grows more desperate for reassurance, because the more unstable they feel, the easier they are to control. And this isn't just in romantic relationships. It happens everywhere. In workplaces, a toxic boss pits employees against each other, constantly favoring one person over the rest to keep everyone on edge. In families, a parent compares their children, creating rivalry instead of connection. In politics, leaders divide people into factions, turning them against each other to maintain power. But why does it work? Because humans are wired for social validation. When someone we care about or respect suddenly introduces competition, our brains go into survival mode. We crave reassurance. We want to be chosen. And that desperation makes us vulnerable, willing to do anything to regain favor. The true danger of triangulation is how it rewires thinking. It shifts the victim's focus from, is this relationship good for me, to what can I do to be good enough? It fosters paranoia, self-doubt, and emotional dependence, all while making the manipulator seem desirable, powerful, or in control. So how do you stop it? First, recognize the pattern. If someone is making you feel like you're in constant competition, step back and ask, who benefits from this? Healthy relationships don't require you to prove your worth against someone else. Second, refuse to play the game. The moment you stop reacting, the manipulator loses power. And finally, prioritize self-worth. The stronger your sense of value, the harder it is for someone to manipulate you with comparison and jealousy. At its core, triangulation is a game of control, designed to keep people emotionally unstable and seeking approval. But once you see it for what it is, you don't have to play. And the moment you refuse to play, the game is over. Playing on insecurities. Everyone has insecurities, small whispers of doubt that creep into the back of your mind. Am I good enough? Do they really like me? What if I fail? Now imagine someone knowing exactly what those insecurities are and using them to control you. This is one of the darkest psychological tricks, weaponizing insecurities to manipulate behavior. And it happens everywhere. In relationships, in workplaces, in politics, even in the ads you see every day. One of the most infamous examples, Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme. He didn't just steal billions, he exploited his victims' deepest fears. He preyed on wealthy investors who feared missing out. He made them feel special, chosen, part of an exclusive club. And once he had them hooked, he used their greed, self-doubt, and desire for status against them. The result? People kept giving him money, even when the red flags were right in front of them. That's how this trick works. It starts by identifying someone's deepest fears or desires, then twisting them. A romantic partner subtly makes you feel unattractive, so you seek their validation. A boss hints that you're replaceable, so you work harder for less. A friend constantly reminds you of your past failures to keep you in check. The goal? To make you dependent. Dependent on their reassurance, their approval, their protection. And here's why it's so effective. Insecurities cloud judgment. When someone makes you feel like you're not good enough, you start to second-guess yourself. You become more willing to prove your worth, even at your own expense. And the worst part, they control the supply of validation. They can give it, take it away, and make you work even harder to earn it back. Social media is a breeding ground for this manipulation. Algorithms thrive on insecurity, feeding you ads that make you feel unattractive, unsuccessful, or like you're falling behind. Influencers curate lives designed to make yours feel less exciting. Companies sell you solutions to problems you didn't even know you had, until they pointed them out. But it's not just corporations that use this trick. It happens in families, friendships, and relationships. A toxic parent constantly reminding their child that they'd be nothing without them. A jealous friend downplaying your achievements so you never feel truly successful. A partner chipping away at your confidence, making you feel lucky to have them. Over time, these tactics break people down, making them easier to control. So how do you fight back? First, recognize the pattern. If someone's words or actions make you feel small, uncertain, or like you have something to prove, take a step back. Are they actually trying to help you grow, or are they making you dependent on their validation? Second, rebuild your confidence outside their influence. The less power someone has over your self-worth, the harder it is for them to manipulate you. And finally, remember this: no one who truly cares about you will ever use your insecurities against you. Because the most dangerous thing about this trick isn't just that people fall for it, it's that they often don't even realize it's happening until it's too late. Hoovering, one of the most deceptive tricks in psychological manipulation, doesn't come in the form of anger or threats. It doesn't push you away. It pulls you back in, just when you're about to break free. This is hoovering, a tactic designed to suck you back into a toxic cycle right when you think it's over. The term comes from the Hoover vacuum cleaner because that's exactly what this manipulation does. It sucks you back in just as you're gaining distance. It's used by narcissists, emotional abusers, and manipulators who can't stand losing control. And the trick works because it preys on hope, the hope that things will finally be different this time. A textbook example: Charles Manson and his cult followers. When members of his family tried to leave, he didn't always use threats. Instead, he lured them back in with affection, validation, and a false sense of belonging. He made them feel special, irreplaceable, and convinced them the world outside would never understand them the way he did. The goal wasn't just to bring them back, it was to make them willingly surrender control all over again. But how exactly does hoovering work? It's never just one approach. The love bomb. Hoover. The manipulator suddenly floods you with affection. They say they've changed. They remember your favorite songs, send nostalgic messages, remind you of the good times. They become the person you always wish they were, but only for as long as it takes to get you back. The pity Hoover. If love doesn't work, guilt is next. They claim they're struggling. Maybe they're depressed, sick, or going through a crisis. They make you feel responsible for their suffering. They don't ask you to come back outright, but they make sure you feel like a bad person if you don't. The anger Hoover. And if guilt fails, they lash out. They blame you, call you heartless, try to make you jealous by posting about how much happier they are without you. But the goal isn't to move on. It's to provoke a reaction, any reaction, to keep you emotionally hooked. And here's why it works. The brain craves closure. Every moment of kindness makes you forget the cruelty. Every moment of cruelty makes you crave the kindness again. It's not a single manipulation. It's a pattern, a push and pull cycle designed to keep you from ever fully letting go. So, how do you protect yourself? Recognize hoovering for what it is, not a genuine attempt to reconnect, but a tactic of control. The second you see it for what it is, it loses its power. Block contact. Cut the ties completely. Don't engage, not even to explain why. Hoovering only works when there's a response. Without one, the manipulator loses their grip. Because walking away is hard, but staying in the cycle, that's where the real danger lies. And the only way to win, don't play the game. Public shaming. For centuries, public shaming has been one of the most effective tools of control. It can strip a person of their dignity, isolate them from their community, and turn them into a cautionary tale. Whether it's a medieval village gathering to mock a criminal in the stocks or a social media mob tearing apart someone's reputation, the psychology behind it remains the same. Public shaming isn't just about punishment. It's about breaking a person down so completely that they accept their own destruction. One of the most infamous examples, the Salem witch trials. In 1692, innocent people, mostly women, were dragged into the public eye, accused of being witches, and forced to confess under extreme pressure. The accusations weren't built on evidence, but on fear, hysteria, and the overwhelming power of public condemnation. Once someone became a target, their fate was sealed. Because when a crowd forms, reason disappears. But why does public humiliation work so well? The answer lies in one of our deepest, most primal human fears: social rejection. Humans are wired for connection. We survive in groups. To be cast out means danger. In ancient times, exile from a tribe was often a death sentence. And while today's world may not physically exile people, public humiliation triggers the same biological terror, the fear of being completely alone, despised, and powerless. And it doesn't just happen on a massive scale, it happens everywhere. In workplaces, where a boss ridicules an employee in front of others. In classrooms, where a student is shamed for making a mistake. In relationships, where one partner humiliates the other in front of friends. It's a power move, designed to make the victim feel small, weak, and dependent on the person or group that shamed them. And here's where the psychological trap deepens. After the humiliation, many victims seek approval from their abuser. Instead of fighting back, they try to regain acceptance, making them even easier to manipulate. And now, social media has taken public shaming to a new level. A single mistake, a poorly worded tweet, a misunderstood joke. Within hours, thousands of strangers become judges, juries, and executioners. The larger the crowd, the less individual responsibility anyone feels. It becomes a feeding frenzy of outrage. And once someone has been branded as bad, the internet rarely forgives. But public shaming isn't just about punishing individuals, it's about controlling everyone else. When someone is humiliated in front of others, it sends a warning. Step out of line, and this could be you. It enforces social norms, not necessarily because they're right, but because the fear of humiliation is stronger than the will to resist. So how do you protect yourself against public shaming? The first step is to recognize its purpose. It is designed to control you through fear. The moment you understand that, the power of shame begins to weaken. Refusing to engage with it, standing your ground, and rejecting the guilt trap are the strongest ways to break free. Because the true trick of public humiliation is that it relies on one thing: your belief that you deserve it. And the moment you stop believing that, the spell is broken. Divide and conquer. Two people, once inseparable, suddenly find themselves questioning everything about each other. The trust they built over years starts to crack, not because of anything they did, but because someone else wanted it that way. A rumor here, a twisted truth there. Small calculated actions designed to drive a wedge between them. And once that wedge is deep enough, the person who planted it owns the game. This is divide and conquer, a manipulation strategy so effective that it has been used for centuries to control groups, dismantle alliances, and consolidate power. It works by breaking apart unity, making sure people are too distracted by conflict to notice who's pulling the strings. History is full of examples. The British Empire used this strategy to control vast territories, turning local groups against each other so they were too busy fighting among themselves to challenge colonial rule. Authoritarian leaders do the same, stoking division among their people, whether through political factions, social groups, or manufactured outrage, to prevent anyone from uniting against them. But this isn't just a strategy used on grand scales. It happens in everyday life. A manipulative boss pits employees against each other, ensuring no one trusts their co-workers enough to push back against unfair treatment. A toxic partner creates tension between their significant other and their friends or family, making sure they become the only trusted influence. Narcissists thrive on this trick, subtly spreading misinformation to make sure no one around them forms a strong enough bond to resist their control. The key is isolation. When people no longer trust each other, they become dependent on the manipulator. They seek validation, approval, and direction from the only person who seems reliable, the one who caused the division in the first place. That's when control is complete. And the scariest part, it doesn't take outright lies to work, just a small distortion of the truth, a missing piece of context, a carefully timed exaggeration. The result? Allies turn into enemies, and the one pulling the strings remains untouchable. Social proof exploitation. In 1968, a woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked outside her apartment in New York. She screamed for help for nearly half an hour. Dozens of people saw or heard the assault, yet no one intervened. No one called the police. Everyone assumed someone else would step in. This chilling effect is known as social proof, a psychological bias so deeply ingrained that it influences almost every decision we make. It's the instinct to follow the crowd, to assume that if many people believe or do something, it must be right. It's why people flock to restaurants with long lines, why trends take off overnight, and why misinformation can spread faster than truth. But when social proof is manipulated, it becomes a weapon. Advertisers use it constantly. They tell you millions of people love their product, that it's a #1 bestseller, or that everyone is switching to a new service. You might have never looked into it yourself, but the illusion of mass approval makes you instinctively trust it. Even a handful of fake reviews can be enough to push someone toward a purchase. Scammers use the same trick. Ever seen a product flooded with glowing but suspiciously similar reviews? A cryptocurrency hyped up by bots on social media? A sudden surge of accounts promoting a false narrative? These tactics manufacture credibility where none exists. It's the same method used by cults, Ponzi schemes, and propaganda machines. Make people believe everyone else is doing it, and they'll follow. But the real danger of social proof isn't just in marketing. It's in how it controls behavior in groups. Studies show that the more people witness an emergency, the less likely anyone is to help. It's called the bystander effect. Everyone assumes someone else will take responsibility. And in extreme cases, social proof fuels mob mentality. A person who would never commit violence alone might do so in a crowd because it feels justified. Morality gets outsourced. If no one else is stopping it, it must be okay. And here's where it gets unsettling. It doesn't take much to trigger social proof. A few planted opinions, a handful of fake followers, a carefully orchestrated trend, and suddenly the illusion becomes real. Once enough people believe something, even skeptics start to fall in line. The scariest part. Most people will never realize they've been manipulated. They'll follow the crowd, convinced they made the decision themselves. Mind control. What if I told you that your thoughts, your beliefs, your opinions, even your memories could be rewritten? That right now, without realizing it, someone could be bending your mind to their will. No force, no obvious manipulation, just subtle, calculated influence. Sounds like science fiction, right? But it's real. And it happens far more often than you think. Take the Stanford prison experiment, one of the most infamous psychological studies ever conducted. In 1971, researchers at Stanford University recruited 24 ordinary students, dividing them into guards and prisoners for a simulated prison. No one was forced. No one was brainwashed. And yet, within days, the guards, regular college students, became cruel, authoritarian, even sadistic. They humiliated the prisoners, forced them into stress positions, even denied them basic necessities. And the prisoners? They broke down, emotionally and mentally, accepting their abuse as if it were real. All of this happened not because anyone told them to, but because of psychological erosion, the slow, insidious breakdown of personal identity under the right conditions. The first step? Isolation. Remove people from their normal environment, and they become vulnerable. Their reality shrinks. Their world narrows to whatever they're told. The prisoners in the experiment weren't physically trapped, but psychologically, they were. And it's not just experiments or cults where this happens. Governments, corporations, even toxic relationships. Control thrives where people stop questioning. The human brain craves patterns, repetition, familiarity. If you hear something often enough, it starts feeling true, even if it isn't. That's why propaganda works. That's why conspiracy theories spread. That's why some people defend beliefs that are actively harming them. Then there's fear, the most powerful tool of all. When people are afraid, they seek security. And the easiest way to control someone, offer them certainty. Authoritarian leaders create external enemies. Cult leaders predict the end of the world. Manipulative partners turn you against your friends. The goal is the same. Keep you scared. Keep you dependent. Keep you from thinking too much. Because once fear takes hold, your mind narrows. You stop questioning. And once that happens, control is complete. That's what makes this the darkest psychology trick of all. It doesn't force you to change. It makes you want to. And by the time you realize what's happened, if you ever do, it's already too late. Exploiting the need for closure. Some questions never stop echoing in the back of your mind. Why did they leave? What really happened? What was the truth? That gnawing uncertainty, that feeling of unfinished business, it's not just a minor frustration. It's a powerful psychological force known as the need for closure. And when someone understands just how much you crave a definitive answer, they can use that against you in ways you'd never expect. The need for closure is a fundamental part of human cognition. Our brains hate loose ends. When something is unresolved, our minds work overtime trying to make sense of it. We fill in the gaps, we create explanations, we latch onto anything that gives us a sense of finality. And this is exactly where manipulation begins. Take relationships, for example. Have you ever heard of someone staying obsessed with an ex, not because they want them back, but because they never got a real explanation for why things ended? That's the power of an open psychological loop. When a breakup happens abruptly, without clear reasoning, it leaves a hole in the person's mind. They replay every interaction, searching for clues, obsessing over possible answers. And if the person who left them hanging ever returns, even with a weak or dishonest excuse, their brain grabs onto it just to satisfy that desperate need for closure. Manipulators know this. They disappear suddenly, only to return later with vague explanations, knowing their victims will be too relieved to question the lies. But this tactic isn't just used in personal relationships. It's weaponized on a much larger scale. Look at cults. One of the most effective ways cult leaders keep their followers under control is by dangling half-revealed secrets. They tell their followers that they're on the verge of learning something life-changing, but they just need to prove themselves first. That proof? It's endless. More loyalty, more obedience, more sacrifice. But the truth is, there is no great secret. Just a psychological trick to keep people trapped in an endless cycle of searching. Even in politics, the need for closure is one of the most powerful tools of mass persuasion. Political propaganda often thrives on ambiguity. A politician might claim, "There's something they're not telling you," or "The real story is out there if you look hard enough." They don't provide facts, just enough uncertainty to make people start filling in the blanks themselves. And here's the dark part. When people are forced to create their own explanations, they tend to believe them more strongly than actual facts. Marketers also use this trick every single day. Cliffhangers, vague advertisements, mysterious teasers, all designed to keep you hooked. Ever noticed how TV shows end with unresolved plot lines? Or how a brand hints at an exciting product reveal but gives no details? They do this because they know your mind won't let it go. You'll keep thinking about it, looking for clues, searching for answers, until you give in and buy whatever they're selling. But here's where it gets really unsettling. Our need for closure makes us accept any answer, even if it's false. Studies show that when people are desperate for resolution, they become far more susceptible to misinformation, conspiracy theories, and outright lies. It's easier to believe a convenient lie than to live with lingering uncertainty. This is why cult members cling to false teachings, why people fall for scams, and why entire populations can be led to believe completely fabricated narratives. And the worst part? The more we seek closure, the easier we are to manipulate. The more we demand answers, the more control we give to those willing to provide them. Because in the end, whoever controls the answers controls the mind, creating a sense of scarcity. Ever noticed how the moment something seems limited, exclusive, or hard to get, you suddenly want it more? It doesn't matter whether it's a luxury car, a rare sneaker drop, or even someone's attention. Scarcity makes things irresistible. And here's the disturbing part. It's one of the most exploited psychological tricks in existence. Think about Black Friday. Every year, people trample over each other for discounted TVs and microwaves, not because they desperately need them, but because they've been told supplies are running out. Stores manufacture scarcity, creating the illusion of high demand. It doesn't matter if the same product is available next week. In that moment, people act impulsively, driven by fear of missing out. This trick hijacks your brain at the deepest level. When something is scarce, your survival instincts kick in. Thousands of years ago, scarcity meant life or death. If food, water, or shelter was limited, you fought for it. That instinct still lingers today, making you irrationally chase anything that seems rare, even if you don't need it. It's why luxury brands limit production. The fewer handbags, the more people crave them. It's why social media influencers post exclusive content behind paywalls. The illusion of scarcity makes it seem more valuable. And it's why dating apps make people obsessed over someone who isn't available. The less you can have them, the more you want them. But this psychological trick isn't just about selling products. It's been used to manipulate entire societies. Totalitarian regimes restrict information, making people desperate for what they can't access. Cult leaders use it to control followers, convincing them that only they have the truth, and the outside world offers nothing. And the most unsettling part? Scarcity makes people blind to logic. When you believe something is slipping away, you stop asking if you even want it in the first place. Bandwagon effect manipulation. It starts with a simple thought. Everyone else is doing it, so it must be right. That's the bandwagon effect in action. The psychological trick that exploits your deepest, most primitive fear, the fear of being left out. It's what makes people follow trends, believe in misinformation, and conform to ideas they've never even questioned. Think about the Salem witch trials. In the late 1600s, a few accusations of witchcraft spiraled into mass hysteria, leading to dozens of executions. Why? Because people saw their neighbors turning on each other, and instead of questioning the madness, they joined in. When the crowd moves in one direction, standing against it feels impossible. At its core, the bandwagon effect is simple. When enough people adopt a belief or behavior, others follow. Not because they logically agree, but because they fear being left behind. It's why financial bubbles form. Think of the 2008 housing crisis. People kept investing in real estate, watching prices climb higher and higher. Everyone else was doing it, so it must have been safe, right? Until the bubble popped and the economy collapsed. It's why propaganda works. When a government wants to push an idea, they don't need to convince everyone. They just need enough people to believe it. Once the illusion of consensus is created, the rest follow. And here's where it gets dark. The bandwagon effect is actively weaponized. Advertisers use it to manipulate consumer behavior, making people feel that if they don't buy a product, they're missing out. Social media algorithms exploit it, amplifying content that already has engagement. Because if thousands of people like a post, others are more likely to believe it, even if it's false. Politicians manufacture public approval by staging rallies with paid crowds, creating the illusion of widespread support. It bypasses critical thinking. People stop questioning whether something is right, logical, or even true. They just go along with it. The more people follow, the stronger the effect becomes, snowballing into mass conformity. And once you're on the bandwagon, you don't even realize it. You become convinced it was your choice all along. Lowballing. You walk into a car dealership excited to buy your first car. The salesperson greets you with a warm smile and says, "Good news! We have a special deal today. This car, fully loaded, for just $20,000. That's within your budget." You shake hands, feel the thrill of the purchase, and start picturing yourself behind the wheel. But just as you're about to sign the paperwork, the salesperson frowns and says, "I just checked with my manager. Unfortunately, I made a mistake. That price doesn't include some mandatory fees. It's actually $23,000. At this point, you're already mentally committed to the car. You've imagined owning it, maybe even bragged to friends about the deal you got. So instead of walking away, you agree to the new price. You just got low-balled. This psychological trick is devastatingly effective. It works by getting you to commit to something before the full cost is revealed. Once you've made a decision, even based on misleading information, you become emotionally and mentally invested. Backing out now feels like a loss, even though the terms have changed. One of the most famous studies on lowballing involved college students. Psychologists asked them to participate in a study. Most agreed. But after they committed, they were informed the study required them to show up at 7 a.m. Even though that's an inconvenient time, most stuck with their original decision instead of backing out. This tactic isn't just for sales. It's used in jobs, negotiations, and even relationships. A recruiter might promise a dream job with a high salary, only for the offer to suddenly include longer hours, lower pay, or extra responsibilities. In more manipulative scenarios, lowballing is used to control people. A cult or extremist group might invite someone in with seemingly harmless requests. Attend a seminar, listen to a speech, meet some people. But after committing, they're slowly asked for more and more. By the time they realize how deep they're in, they've already accepted so many conditions that turning back feels impossible. Because the real danger of lowballing? It's not just about losing money, it's about losing control. Door in the face technique. Let's say a charity worker approaches you on the street and asks, "Would you be willing to donate $500 to help struggling families?" That's a big ask. You probably hesitate, feel a little awkward, and then say no. But then they follow up with, "Okay, totally understandable. How about just $20? That second request suddenly feels so much smaller, more reasonable, and without realizing it, you reach into your pocket and hand over the cash. You just fell for one of the most powerful compliance techniques in psychology, the door in the face technique. This trick works because of something deeply embedded in human psychology: reciprocal concessions. When someone lowers their demand after an initial rejection, we feel pressured to meet them halfway. It's as if we now owe them something, just because they made a compromise. It's been tested in countless studies. In one famous experiment, researchers first asked students to commit to volunteering 2 hours a week for 2 years at a juvenile detention center. Every single person declined. But then, they immediately followed up with a much smaller request. Okay, would you at least be willing to chaperone a group of kids on a one-day trip to the zoo? 3 times as many students agreed to the second request compared to when it was asked outright. Why? Because after saying no to the extreme request, the smaller one felt like an easy favor in comparison. And this technique is everywhere. Think about negotiations. A salesperson might start with an outrageous price, only to generously bring it down to a number they wanted all along, making you feel like you scored a deal. It's also a favorite tactic in law enforcement and interrogation techniques. A detective might push a suspect with an extreme accusation, maybe even falsely implying a life-ruining punishment, only to then offer a much lesser charge if they confess. Faced with the horrifying first option, the second one feels like an escape. But in reality, it's a trap. On a darker scale, this is how manipulative people and organizations operate. Cults, high control groups, and even abusive relationships exploit this principle to break people down. First, they demand absolute obedience or extreme sacrifice, something impossible. But when they relent and ask for just a little loyalty, just a small compromise, it suddenly feels manageable. And just like that, you're in. Because the real trick isn't about getting what they ask for, it's about making you feel like saying yes was your idea. Foot in the door technique. Let's start with a simple question. Would you put a tiny sticker on your window to support a cause you believe in? Seems harmless, right? It's just a sticker. But what if, a few weeks later, the same organization asked you to put up a full-size sign in your front yard? Statistically, you're far more likely to say yes, simply because you said yes to the first, much smaller request. And just like that, you've fallen into one of the most insidious psychological traps. The foot in the door technique. This trick is terrifyingly effective because it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like your own decision. One of the most famous real-world examples, the 1974 Patty Hearst case. Patty, the heiress to a newspaper empire, was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army, a radical militant group. Initially, she was terrified, but her captors didn't force her to pledge loyalty overnight. They started small, forcing her to record a message condemning her family. Then she participated in minor activities. And before long, she was robbing banks alongside her captors, fully believing in their cause. How does this work? The trick exploits consistency bias, our deep psychological need to stay consistent with our past behavior. If we agree to a small request, we subconsciously align ourselves with that choice. When a bigger request follows, our brain justifies compliance by thinking, I already said yes once, so this must be the right thing to do. Advertisers use this constantly. Ever wondered why free trials exist? Once you've used a service for a few weeks, you feel committed. The thought of cancelling, even if you don't really need it, feels like going back on your own decision. It's also a weapon in high-pressure sales. First, they convince you to just take a test drive. Then, just sit down and talk numbers. Before you know it, you're signing papers, trapped by the momentum of your own compliance. And in darker cases, this is how cults and extremist groups recruit. They don't ask for absolute loyalty up front. Instead, they start with something small. Attend a meeting, sign a petition, donate a small amount. The deeper you go, the harder it becomes to say no. Because once you take that first step, you're already walking down the path they chose for you. Think about this the next time someone asks for a small favor. The request itself might not be the real trap. It's what comes after that you should be worried about. Creating a sense of urgency. Imagine this. You're scrolling through an online store when you see the perfect item. But then, a bold red timer appears beneath it. Only 2 left in stock. Sale ends in 3 minutes. Your heart rate spikes. You don't have time to think. If you hesitate, you might lose it forever. So, you buy it. And just like that, you've been played. This is the power of urgency manipulation, one of the most effective ways to control human behavior. It bypasses rational thinking and forces people to act on impulse. The worst part, you probably won't even realize you've been manipulated. A perfect real-world example. The 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast. When Orson Welles performed a fictional alien invasion as a news-style broadcast, thousands of people panicked. Why? Because it felt immediate. They didn't have time to think critically. Reports of alien attacks spread before anyone even questioned if it was real. That's what urgency does. It hijacks your brain and forces immediate action. So how does this psychological trick work? It plays on loss aversion, a bias where people fear losing something more than they desire gaining it. The idea that an opportunity is slipping away triggers anxiety, which clouds judgment. Marketers use it constantly. Limited time offer, flash sale, only a few left in stock. These phrases aren't just information, they're psychological weapons. Suddenly, buying isn't a choice, it's a race. And the moment you feel rushed, you've already lost. But it gets even darker. Cults, scammers, and con artists rely on urgency to trap victims before they can think clearly. Pyramid schemes, for example, push recruits into making fast financial commitments. Act now, or you'll miss your chance to be rich. The pressure forces decisions without scrutiny. By the time the person realizes, they're already in too deep. Even politicians and media outlets weaponize urgency. Fear-mongering headlines, emergency press conferences, breaking news alerts, all designed to provoke immediate emotional reactions. When people are afraid, they don't stop to verify facts. That's when misinformation spreads the fastest. Think about how wars start, how stock markets crash, how riots explode overnight. It's almost always a manufactured sense of urgency. When emotions take control, rational thought shuts down. And that's the moment people become the easiest to manipulate. The most disturbing part, urgency feels natural. It feels like you're making the right decision when, in reality, someone else has already made it for you. So the next time you see a countdown timer, an urgent warning, or someone pushing you to act immediately, pause. Because the moment you feel rushed, you might already be under someone else's control. Suggestive language and hypnosis. Have you ever been in a conversation where someone subtly led you to a decision, one you thought was entirely your own? Maybe you walked into a store, and before you knew it, you were convinced to buy something you didn't even need. You probably thought it was your own choice, but what if it wasn't? What if a few carefully chosen words could bypass your critical thinking and plant a decision in your mind before you even realize it? That's the power of suggestive language and hypnosis. A method so subtle, yet so effective, that it has been used to influence everything from courtroom testimonies to political speeches. It's not about swinging pocket watches or making people cluck like chickens. It's about shaping perception without resistance. Take the infamous 1970s case of the Lost in the Mall experiment. A psychologist named Elizabeth Loftus wanted to test how easily people's memories could be manipulated. She told participants a fake childhood story about being lost in a shopping mall, crying, and finally being rescued by a kind stranger. The catch? This never actually happened. Yet, many participants remembered the event in vivid detail. Their minds filled in the gaps, creating a false reality, just because someone suggested it. That's the terrifying part of suggestive language. It doesn't need to be true to be effective. It just needs to be framed in a way that your brain accepts it as truth. Now, combine this with hypnosis, and you have something even more unsettling. Hypnosis isn't about mind control. It's about lowering psychological defenses. It puts a person in a state of hyper-focus and relaxation, where suggestions slip in without triggering resistance. In this state, someone can be guided to believe, feel, or even remember things that never actually happened. It works through embedded commands, phrases hidden within normal conversation. A politician might say, "When you step into that voting booth, you'll feel a strong sense of trust in our leadership." The key phrase, "feel a strong sense of trust." It's not an argument, it's a suggestion, one your brain processes without questioning. Marketing and sales use this constantly. A waiter asking, "Would you like the steak or the seafood special?" is subtly removing your ability to say no. The question assumes you're ordering. It's just a matter of what. And then there's the yes ladder technique. Small agreements prime people for larger ones. A classic car salesman trick. Start with minor commitments. "This is a nice car, isn't it? Wouldn't it be great to drive something this reliable? You'd probably love how smooth the handling feels, right?" Each small yes makes the next one feel natural. By the time the contract is in front of you, your brain is wired to agree. But here's where it gets even darker. Suggestive language can be used to alter memories, behaviors, and even identities. Cult leaders, con artists, and even interrogators use these techniques to shape narratives. Frame a question the right way, and you can change someone's reality. Police interrogations have led to false confessions using suggestive language. A suspect repeatedly told, "You don't remember it now, but memory comes back in pieces," may start doubting their own innocence. Their mind tries to reconcile the contradiction. Eventually, it's easier to just believe they did it. And once a suggestion takes hold, it's nearly impossible to undo. That's the true horror of it. A single phrase, a carefully worded statement, a slight shift in tone, it can rewrite someone's perception of reality forever. So, how many of your beliefs are actually yours? And how many were planted there without you ever realizing it? Priming effects. You walk into a store and soft classical music is playing. You feel a little more refined, maybe a bit more willing to splurge. Later, you're at a restaurant and the menu has elegant cursive font. Suddenly, the higher-priced dishes seem more appealing. You think you're making decisions freely, but in reality, you've been primed. Priming is one of the most subtle, yet powerful psychological tricks. It's the process of implanting an idea into your mind without you realizing it, making you more likely to think, feel, or act in a certain way. It doesn't require force, persuasion, or even awareness. It's a whisper to your subconscious, guiding your decisions before you even know you're making them. One of the most famous examples of priming in action. The old age experiment. Researchers had participants unscramble sentences containing words like wrinkled, bingo, and Florida. Afterward, they timed how long it took them to walk down a hallway. The result? Those exposed to age-related words walked significantly slower, without realizing why. Their minds had been primed to feel older, and their bodies responded accordingly. This trick is everywhere. Supermarkets place fresh flowers near the entrance to make you associate the store with freshness and quality. Political ads repeat the same phrases over and over until they become familiar, and therefore more believable. Job interviewers are influenced by words they saw earlier in the day. If they read about failure, they might judge a candidate more harshly. Priming works because the brain loves patterns. It's constantly looking for connections, even when none exist. If you hear the word yellow, you'll recognize banana faster than if you heard an unrelated word. If you see a brand logo frequently enough, you start to feel like you trust it, even if you've never bought their product. But here's where it gets darker. Priming isn't just about nudging choices. It can be used to control narratives and perceptions. News headlines carefully choose words to set the tone of a story before you even read the details. A crime report using youth instead of gang makes the event feel different. A company calling layoffs right-sizing makes job losses sound like a strategic move rather than a failure. And it gets worse. In legal cases, a single priming word can sway a jury. When witnesses are asked, "How fast was the car going when it smashed into the other?" they estimate higher speeds than if asked, "How fast was it going when it bumped into the other?" One word, smashed, was enough to distort their memory. Social media feeds priming effects constantly. Every like, every suggested post, every trending topic. It's all shaping how you think before you even form your own opinion. Even a simple change in font or color can influence emotions. Studies show that people primed with the color red tend to perform worse on tests. likely because red is unconsciously linked to danger and correction. The most dangerous part: once primed, you rarely question it. If you're primed to see someone as untrustworthy, you'll interpret everything they do through that lens. If you're primed to expect a bad experience, you'll find reasons to confirm it. Priming doesn't just influence one moment, it reshapes how you filter reality. So ask yourself, how many of your thoughts are truly yours? And more importantly, how many of them were planted before you even realized it? Subliminal messaging. You think you're in control of your thoughts, your choices, your beliefs. But what if I told you that right now, as you listen to this, there are messages being planted in your mind? Messages you'll never consciously register, but will still influence your decisions? Subliminal messaging isn't science fiction. It's real, it's powerful, and it's been used for decades to manipulate people without them ever realizing it. The most infamous example? The 1957 Coca-Cola experiment. A market researcher named James Vickery claimed he had flashed the words "drink Coca-Cola" and "eat popcorn" on a movie screen for just a fraction of a second, too fast for conscious awareness, but just enough for the subconscious to absorb it. He later reported that concession sales skyrocketed. The world panicked. People feared they were being hypnotized into buying things against their will. While Vickery later admitted to falsifying the results, the concept itself wasn't a lie. In fact, advertising agencies, political campaigns, and even intelligence agencies have since experimented with subliminal techniques because they work. At its core, subliminal messaging is about bypassing critical thinking. The conscious mind filters information, but the subconscious mind absorbs everything. When an image, phrase, or idea is subtly repeated, it embeds itself into your mind without resistance. Later, when you're making a decision, you'll feel a strange, unexplained pull toward a certain choice because it has been implanted in your thoughts. One way this is used: hidden imagery in advertisements. Fast food brands have been caught placing visual triggers, suggestive shapes, familiar symbols, even hidden words, to make their food look more appealing. Political campaigns use color psychology and background music to create emotions that subtly sway opinions. Even social media algorithms play a role, nudging people towards certain viewpoints by subtly reinforcing what they want you to see. But it gets worse. Subliminal messaging isn't just visual, it's auditory too. Certain sounds, embedded at barely perceptible levels in music or commercials, can trigger specific emotional responses. Some studies suggest that low-frequency sounds can induce unease, while higher frequencies can create a sense of urgency or excitement. Have you ever walked into a store and suddenly felt compelled to shop longer? That could be carefully designed background music manipulating your brain into staying, browsing, and buying. And then there's priming. You see something subtle, an image, a phrase, a color, without realizing its impact. Later, when you encounter a related situation, your brain fills in the gaps and nudges you toward the outcome it's been preconditioned to expect. Casinos do this all the time. Bright flashing lights, the constant sound of slot machines winning, no clocks, no windows. It's all engineered to make you lose track of time and keep spending. Perhaps the darkest part of subliminal messaging is how seamlessly it integrates into everyday life. News outlets use subtle word choices to shape narratives. Social media platforms carefully curate your feed to reinforce your beliefs. Even in relationships, people can use subliminal reinforcement to manipulate their partners, gradually altering their perception of reality. So, the question is, how much of your thinking is actually yours? How many choices have you made that were subtly engineered without you even realizing it? The most unsettling part about subliminal messaging isn't that it exists, it's that you may never truly know when it's working on you. Neuro-linguistic programming. Ever had a conversation where someone seemed to be guiding your thoughts without you even realizing it? Where, before you knew it, you were agreeing, nodding along, and feeling strangely compelled to trust their perspective? That wasn't an accident. That was a technique, neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. a set of psychological tricks so subtle, so effective, that entire industries have been built on them. At its core, NLP is about influencing people's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors through language and subconscious cues. It works by detecting patterns in speech, body language, and mental associations, then subtly steering them toward a desired conclusion. Used ethically, it's marketed as a way to improve communication, confidence, and persuasion. Used maliciously, it can be a tool for manipulation, deception, and even control. One of the most well-known examples: the embedded command, a hypnotic technique where a request is disguised within a casual sentence. Instead of directly telling someone, "You should trust me," an NLP practitioner might say, "You might not even realize it yet, but you're starting to trust what I'm saying." The suggestion is planted. The mind processes it without resistance. Another tactic: mirroring. When someone subtly mimics your posture, speech patterns, and energy level, your brain interprets it as familiarity. You instinctively trust them without even knowing why. Cult leaders use it to build deep rapport. High-pressure salespeople use it to lower your defenses. It's why you sometimes feel connected to someone you've only just met. But the most chilling NLP trick is anchoring, associating an emotion with a specific word, gesture, or stimulus. If a manipulator repeatedly makes you feel safe whenever they use a certain phrase, your brain links that feeling to them. Later, even when they're being deceptive, that same phrase triggers trust. The real danger of NLP isn't just that it works, it's that you won't even know it's happening. Pacing and leading. You ever meet someone who just gets you? Someone who seems to be on your wavelength, saying the right things, making you feel like they understand you better than most. You trust them, maybe even follow their advice because, well, it feels natural. But what if that was engineered? What if they weren't just understanding you, but leading you, without you even realizing it? This is called pacing and leading, a psychological technique used in persuasion, manipulation, and even mind control. It works by first matching the person's thoughts, emotions, or behaviors, pacing them, before subtly shifting them toward a desired outcome. Done correctly, it makes people agree, comply, or follow without resistance. Ever noticed how cult leaders, con artists, or even politicians start by mirroring the frustrations of their audience? I know how you feel. You're tired. You've been ignored. You've been mistreated. That's pacing, acknowledging and aligning with the target's current reality. And once trust is established, they begin to lead. And that's why you need to listen to me. I have the solution. Follow me. It's used in everyday life too. Salespeople pace by repeating your concerns before guiding you toward a purchase. Interrogators gain compliance by mirroring body language, speech, and emotional state before steering responses. Even in relationships, someone might first agree with your feelings, making you feel safe, before shaping your choices. And here's what makes it dangerous. It feels natural. The manipulation isn't forced, it's welcomed. You think you're making decisions, but in reality, your choices have been pre-scripted, introduced so smoothly that by the time you realize what's happening, you're already 2 steps ahead on a path you never chose. Scapegoating. History repeats itself, not because people don't learn, but because manipulation works. And one of the oldest, most dangerous psychological tricks is scapegoating, the art of blaming a single person or group for problems they didn't create. It's a tactic so powerful that it has fueled witch hunts, toppled governments, and destroyed countless lives. A perfect example: the Salem witch trials. In the late 1600s, paranoia gripped the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Strange illnesses, crop failures, rising tensions. People needed answers. And instead of facing the complexities of reality, they turned to a simple, chilling conclusion: witchcraft. Dozens of people, mostly women, were accused with little to no evidence. Neighbors betrayed neighbors. Executions followed. And yet, the real problem, the fear and instability brewing beneath the surface, remained untouched. Because scapegoating isn't about finding the truth, it's about controlling the narrative. So why does it work so well? Because people crave simple answers to complex problems. When things go wrong, whether in a family, a workplace, or an entire nation, it's easier to believe there's a single villain behind it all. Admitting that problems are complicated, that they might not have one neat explanation, is uncomfortable. Blame brings relief. It gives people the illusion of understanding, even if that understanding is completely false. And this trick isn't just used in history books. Blame shifting, a smaller but equally dangerous version, happens every day. A cheating partner accuses their spouse of being paranoid. A corrupt politician blames the media for their downfall. A failing CEO pins the company's collapse on lazy employees. It's a psychological sleight of hand, redirecting attention so the real problem stays hidden. And the more this trick is used, the harder it becomes to see the truth. The scapegoat becomes the distraction. The real causes of the problem remain untouched, and people become so invested in their blame that they reject any evidence that contradicts it. This is how entire groups have been persecuted throughout history, not because of what they did, but because someone needed a villain. So, how do you avoid falling into this trap? Look beyond the obvious. If a problem is being reduced to a single enemy, ask yourself, who benefits from this? What's being ignored while all attention is focused on the scapegoat? And most importantly, are you being manipulated into believing an easy lie over a difficult truth? Because the most effective form of control isn't force, it's fear. And when that fear is given a face, a name, a scapegoat, it becomes the perfect weapon. Authority bias. In 1961, an experiment took place that revealed something deeply unsettling about human nature. Psychologist Stanley Milgram wanted to understand how far people would go when following orders from an authority figure. Participants were led to believe they were part of a learning study. Their task: to administer electric shocks to another person every time they answered a question incorrectly. With each mistake, the shocks grew stronger, escalating from mild discomfort to agonizing pain. The person being shocked screamed, pleaded, even fell silent. But here's the catch. They weren't real. They were actors, pretending to suffer. Yet most participants kept pressing the button. They hesitated. They looked uneasy. But when the man in the white lab coat told them to continue, they did. 2/3 of them followed instructions to the very end, delivering what they believed to be potentially fatal shocks, simply because an authority figure told them to. This is authority bias, our instinctive tendency to trust and obey those we see as powerful, knowledgeable, or in charge. It's the same psychological mechanism that makes us follow doctors' orders without question, believe news anchors without verifying facts, or obey workplace policies even when they don't make sense. But in the wrong hands, this instinct can be exploited, overriding morality, logic, and even self-preservation. History is full of examples. Corrupt governments have used blind obedience to justify atrocities. Corporations have suppressed whistleblowers by enforcing rigid hierarchies. Cult leaders have demanded absolute loyalty, convincing followers to surrender their freedom, their money, even their lives. Authority bias works because the brain takes shortcuts. Instead of questioning every decision, it assumes authority figures know best. A uniform, a title, a badge. These symbols create an illusion of infallibility. And the more confident an authority figure appears, the harder it becomes to challenge them. This is why scammers pose as police officers to extort money. Why historical medical figures convince people to accept harmful treatments. Why soldiers in war zones have carried out unthinkable orders. Because refusing wasn't an option. And the effect becomes even stronger when obedience is combined with fear. When an authority figure not only commands, but also threatens, whether subtly or openly, resistance becomes nearly impossible. People comply even when they know something is wrong, because defying authority feels dangerous. The most disturbing part? You don't even need real authority to exploit this bias, just the illusion of it. A uniform, a fake badge, a confident tone. These are often enough to make people comply without question. The most effective tricks don't force people into submission. They make them willingly hand over control. Groupthink induction. One of the most dangerous psychological tricks isn't about manipulating a single person. It's about influencing entire groups until questioning the consensus feels impossible. It doesn't force people to agree. Instead, it creates an environment where disagreement feels like betrayal. And once that happens, people stop thinking critically, even when the decisions being made are obviously flawed. Imagine a high-stakes corporate meeting. A company is about to launch a product and everything points to disaster. Market research shows customers won't buy it. Engineers warn about technical failures, and some executives have private doubts. But in the room, there's nothing but agreement. No one speaks up. No one challenges the decision, not because they don't see the problem, but because no one wants to be the outlier. This is groupthink, a psychological phenomenon where the need for unity overrides logic, skepticism, and even self-preservation. When people are part of a group, they instinctively prioritize harmony. Dissent feels uncomfortable. Doubt makes you an outsider. And when the loudest, most dominant voices set the tone, everyone else follows, often without realizing it. It happens gradually. Maybe an authority figure expresses a strong opinion, and others instinctively align with it. Maybe the group values agreement so much that disagreeing feels like an attack. Over time, the pressure to conform becomes stronger than the pressure to be right. People suppress their doubts, rationalize bad ideas, and convince themselves that if everyone else agrees, it must be the right decision. And the consequences? Disastrous. History is full of catastrophic decisions fueled by groupthink. Failed military invasions, financial collapses, political disasters. Moments where, in hindsight, the flaws were obvious, but no one spoke up when it mattered. And the most dangerous part, inside the groupthink bubble, people don't feel manipulated. They believe they're thinking for themselves. But in reality, they're just echoing the voices around them. Cultivating a false identity. Some manipulators don't just lie, they become the lie. They shape their identities to fit whatever will make people trust them, molding themselves into whoever they need to be. This isn't just deception, it's performance. And when done well, it's nearly impossible to detect. Frank Abagnale, the real-life con artist behind Catch Me If You Can, pulled off one of the most audacious identity scams in history. Before the age of 21, he had successfully posed as a pilot, a doctor, and a lawyer, bluffing his way into positions of authority with nothing but charm, confidence, and carefully chosen details. His entire persona was an illusion, but it worked because he understood a fundamental truth. People don't question what looks real enough. We instinctively judge others based on surface-level cues. Someone who acts like they belong, who speaks with conviction, who looks the part. Our brains fill in the gaps, assuming they must be who they claim to be. A skilled manipulator doesn't just tell lies. They create a version of themselves that people want to believe. And once they establish a false identity, something strange happens. The illusion feeds itself. Others begin reinforcing it, vouching for the manipulator, defending them, even ignoring red flags. If enough people believe the lie, it becomes reality. Cult leaders convince their followers of divine wisdom. Scammers build reputations that seem untouchable. Even entire societies have been swayed by figures who were never who they claim to be. A false identity doesn't just fool others. It can warp the manipulator's own sense of reality. When someone fully embraces their fabricated persona, the line between deception and truth disappears, for them and for everyone around them. And once that happens, even they may no longer know what's real. The seeds of self-doubt. You don't need chains to keep someone trapped. Sometimes all it takes is a whisper in their mind, one that makes them question everything they once knew about themselves. The most insidious form of control doesn't come from force or coercion. It comes from planting a simple thought. What if I'm not good enough? This is the art of sowing self-doubt, a psychological trick that can dismantle confidence, reshape reality, and keep someone locked in a cycle of second-guessing themselves. And the worst part? Once the seed is planted, most people water it themselves. A classic example, the infamous Milgram experiment. While it's often remembered for obedience to authority, there's something more subtle at play. Participants weren't just pressured into shocking others. They were gradually led to doubt their own moral instincts. At first they resisted, but after being repeatedly told, "It's fine, keep going. You have to do this," many began to question their own judgment. If they hesitated, the authority figure reassured them. And with each step forward, their resistance weakened. By the end, they weren't just following orders. They had convinced themselves that their hesitation was misplaced, that maybe they were overreacting. That's how self-doubt works. It doesn't strike all at once. It seeps in slowly, often through calculated, strategic manipulation. It can start with a simple comment. "Are you sure that's the right choice? That doesn't sound like you. You always mess things up like this." When repeated enough, it forces the brain to spiral. It makes people look for evidence that maybe, just maybe, those doubts are true. And once someone starts believing it, their confidence collapses like a house of cards. Skilled manipulators use this to control others without ever lifting a finger. If you make someone doubt themselves enough, they'll look to you for validation. They'll become dependent on your approval, constantly seeking reassurance that they're making the right choices. Over time, they lose trust in their own judgment and start deferring to the person who knows better. This is how toxic relationships thrive. It's how abusers keep their victims trapped. It's how cult leaders maintain absolute authority. But here's the most terrifying part. Self-doubt, once ingrained, doesn't just go away. Even if the manipulator disappears, the seeds they planted continue to grow. The voice of doubt remains, whispering, "Maybe they were right about me." And that's why this trick is so dangerous. It doesn't just break people, it makes them break themselves. Exploiting mirror neurons. You yawn when someone else yawns. You laugh when a room erupts in laughter. Your brain isn't just observing, it's mirroring. And while this instinct fuels human connection, it can also be turned against you in ways you'd never suspect. At the core of this manipulation are mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that fire not just when you act, but when you see someone else acting. These neurons are why you flinch when someone gets hurt, or instinctively smile when someone smiles at you. They're the foundation of empathy, bonding, and social influence. But like any powerful tool, they can be weaponized. One of the most infamous examples, the rise of Adolf Hitler. Hitler didn't just give speeches, he mirrored the emotions of his audience. He reflected their fears, frustrations, and hopes back at them. His speeches weren't just words, they were emotional feedback loops amplified by the crowd's response. He didn't persuade with logic, he made people feel. And once emotion takes over, critical thinking shuts down. But mirroring doesn't need a massive crowd to work. Salespeople, politicians, cult leaders, and con artists use it constantly. A manipulator will subtly copy your posture, tone, and gestures to make you feel at ease. Your brain registers the similarity and assumes, this person is like me, I can trust them. It's why a skilled con artist can make you spill your secrets within minutes of meeting them. They're not just listening, they're reflecting you back to yourself. And this trick goes deeper. Mirroring can manufacture attraction and loyalty. Studies show that when someone subtly mimics your body language, you're more likely to like them, trust them, and agree with them, even if you just met. This is how toxic relationships begin. An abuser may start by mirroring their victim's personality, interests, and values, creating an illusion of perfect compatibility. But once that bond is established, the manipulation shifts. The abuser no longer mirrors, but controls. knowing their victim is too emotionally invested to leave. And this trick isn't just used by individuals. It's built into the systems we interact with every day. Social media algorithms act as digital mirror neurons. Ever notice how platforms feed you content that aligns with your existing beliefs? That's not an accident. The algorithm reflects back what you already think and feel, strengthening your biases and filtering out anything that challenges them. Over time, this creates echo chambers, polarization, and an inability to see other perspectives. So how do you protect yourself? First, recognize when you're being mirrored. If someone copies your mannerisms too closely or reflects your emotions too perfectly, pause and question their intentions. Second, disrupt the pattern. Change your posture, shift topics, or introduce an unexpected idea. A genuine person will flow naturally with the conversation. A manipulator will struggle. They rely on predictability to maintain control. Mirror neurons make us human. They help us connect, learn, and empathize. But in the wrong hands, they become a tool for manipulation, turning your own instincts against you. And the most terrifying part? When done well, you won't even realize it's happening. Exploiting empathy. Most people see empathy as a strength, the foundation of trust, connection, and human kindness. But in the wrong hands, it's a weapon, one that can be twisted, exploited, and used to control. The most dangerous manipulators don't force their victims into submission. They make them feel like they're choosing it. Take Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disturbing example of weaponized empathy. A caregiver fabricates or induces illness in someone under their care, often a child, convincing them that they're sick. The victim suffers real pain, becomes completely dependent, and never questions the person hurting them, because they believe they're being helped. Meanwhile, the abuser enjoys the sympathy, attention, and control that come from being seen as a devoted caretaker. This is how manipulators trap people using their own compassion against them. The trick is simple. Create a problem that makes someone feel responsible, then present yourself as the only solution. It starts with subtle guilt, statements like, "You're the only one who understands me. If you leave, I don't know what I'll do." The goal: make the target feel irreplaceable while slowly eroding their autonomy. And if someone resists, that's where compassion fatigue comes in. The manipulator increases their emotional demands, overwhelming their victim until they break down from exhaustion. At some point, giving in feels easier than resisting. And this technique is everywhere. Cults convince followers to abandon their lives for a greater purpose, framing doubt as selfishness. Toxic relationships trap one partner in endless cycles of pity and guilt, forcing them to stay. Scammers pose as victims, sending desperate messages that make you feel like you're the only person who can help. And the scariest part? The more empathetic someone is, the easier they are to manipulate. Because once your compassion becomes an obligation, you stop seeing the trap and start justifying the chains. Obligation. A small favor can feel harmless, even thoughtful. Someone buys you lunch, and the next time, you feel an unspoken need to return the gesture. A friend helps you move, and suddenly you hesitate when they ask for a favor, even if it's inconvenient. It's not forced, it's not demanded, but the weight of obligation lingers. This instinct, the need to reciprocate kindness, is natural. It holds friendships together, builds trust, and keeps social exchanges fair. But when used as a tool for control, it becomes something else entirely. In the 1970s, members of the Hare Krishna movement stood in airports, handing out flowers to strangers. No catch, no expectation, just a gift. But moments later, they would ask for a donation. And most people, even those who didn't want the flower, gave them money. Not because they had to, but because they felt they should. A simple act of generosity became a carefully crafted trap, bringing in millions of dollars from people who simply didn't want to seem ungrateful. This is how the reciprocity principle works. It doesn't demand. It makes you feel like saying no is wrong. It starts with small things, a compliment, a favor, a helping hand, until the sense of debt grows. And when someone calls in that debt, rejecting them feels like breaking an unspoken contract. In personal relationships, this kind of obligation can turn into quiet manipulation. A partner showers you with gifts and attention, then later reminds you how much they've done for you when they need something in return. A friend who has always been generous suddenly makes you feel guilty for not being as available as they want. The balance shifts, and what once felt like kindness becomes something you can't refuse. This tactic extends beyond personal interactions. Businesses give free samples because they know people are more likely to buy after receiving something at no cost. Charities send small gifts in the mail before asking for donations, making it harder to ignore the request. Scammers pretend to help before making their ask, ensuring you feel obligated to return the favor. And the weight of obligation isn't easy to shake. It lingers, making people stay in bad situations, agree to things they wouldn't normally accept, and hesitate when they should walk away. Recognizing this trick is the first step to avoiding it. Not every favor needs to be repaid. Not every act of kindness comes with strings. If saying no makes you feel guilty, ask yourself, was this really a gift, or was it a transaction disguised as one? Emotional contagion exploitation. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt the energy shift? Maybe a single glance at someone's expression made you tense up, or a friend's excitement instantly lifted your mood. This isn't just intuition, it's a psychological phenomenon known as emotional contagion. And in the wrong hands, it's one of the most dangerous manipulation tactics ever used. Emotional contagion is the subconscious transfer of emotions from one person to another. Humans are wired to mirror emotions. It's part of how we connect, empathize, and communicate. If someone around you is anxious, your brain picks up on their cues, body language, tone, facial expressions, and before you know it, you start feeling anxious too. This happens automatically, without conscious awareness. And that's exactly what makes it so easy to exploit. A terrifying example of this in action: mass hysteria. Take the Salem witch trials. One person shows fear, another reacts, and soon an entire town is swept up in paranoia. Nobody questions the source. They just react to the emotional waves spreading around them. The same effect plays out in financial crashes, riots, and even cult dynamics. When people around you panic, you feel the urgency too, even if there's no logical reason for it. Manipulators use emotional contagion to control people without ever needing to say, "Do this." Instead, they create an emotional atmosphere that makes people want to comply. A leader radiating confidence can make their followers ignore obvious flaws. A narcissist feigning sadness can guilt-trip someone into staying in a toxic relationship. A salesperson hyping up a product can make you feel like you need to buy it, simply because their enthusiasm is infectious. Studies show that even faked emotions can trigger genuine responses. A manipulator can manufacture anger, fear, or excitement, and the people around them will absorb and reflect those feelings without realizing they're being played. And once you're emotionally hooked, your ability to think critically starts to fade. It's why political figures rally crowds into a frenzy, why cult leaders maintain unwavering authority, and why toxic relationships often feel impossible to leave. When someone controls the emotional climate, they control the people within it. The next time you feel an emotion rising that wasn't there before, stop and ask, is this mine? Or was it planted there? Because not every feeling you experience is truly your own. Micromanipulation. Imagine this. You're in a conversation. Everything feels normal, but after a few minutes, your thoughts shift. You start questioning your choices, feeling guilty for things you never second-guessed before. The person across from you never raised their voice, never made a direct demand. And yet, somehow, they've nudged your mind in a completely different direction, without you even realizing it. This is micro-manipulation, the subtle, almost imperceptible tactics that control people's decisions, beliefs, and behaviors without them noticing. Unlike obvious coercion or deception, micromanipulation works like slow poison. Drip by drip, small adjustments that push you exactly where they want you. Take the foot in the door tactic, a classic in sales and persuasion. A company might first ask you to sign a harmless petition, something that aligns with your values. Then, days later, they come back asking for a donation. Because you've already said yes once, your brain leans toward consistency. You don't realize it, but that tiny first agreement was a setup, conditioning you to comply with a bigger request later. But micromanipulation isn't just about persuasion, it's about control. In toxic relationships, manipulators use this trick masterfully. Imagine a partner who never outright demands obedience, but instead raises an eyebrow, sighs at the right moment, or gives a subtle pause before responding. Over time, these tiny cues make you adjust your behavior to avoid their disapproval, even if they never explicitly asked you to change. Workplace environments can be just as dangerous. Ever had a boss who casually mentioned how another employee stayed late to finish a project? They never directly told you to work extra hours, but suddenly you feel obligated. This is how micromanipulation works, planting ideas without stating them outright. And then there's social conditioning. Micromanipulation is used on a massive scale in politics, advertising, and media. Consider how brands create artificial exclusivity. Only 5 left in stock, or this deal won't last. They're subtly influencing urgency, making you act without thinking. It's not manipulation in the way you expect, it's worse, because you still think you're making the choice yourself. One of the darkest applications of micromanipulation is in gaslighting. A manipulator doesn't need to outright call you crazy, they just need to question your memory, reframe the narrative, and downplay events subtly enough to make you doubt yourself. They might say, "I don't think I ever said that. Are you sure you're remembering correctly?" It sounds innocent enough, but over time, it erodes confidence, making the victim more pliable, more dependent. This is why micromanipulation is so terrifying. It doesn't look like manipulation at all. It feels like your own thoughts, your own decisions, your own reasoning. It works through gestures, phrasing, timing, and tone, all carefully calibrated to steer you in a specific direction. And the worst part, once someone masters micromanipulation, they can make you believe that their ideas were yours all along. The illusion of choice. You think you're in control. You think every decision you make is entirely your own. But what if I told you that, more often than not, your choices are being carefully orchestrated, designed to make you feel like you're in charge when, in reality, you're just following a predetermined path? This is the illusion of choice, one of the most deceptive and manipulative psychological tricks ever used. Think about a restaurant menu. You sit down, glance at the options, and decide between the steak, the pasta, or the salad. But did you ever question why those specific options are there in the first place? Why is there no burger, no sushi? The truth is, your decision was already limited before you even had a chance to think about it. This trick is everywhere, from politics to marketing to everyday interactions. And it works because people don't usually question the choices they're given. One of the most famous real-world examples: supermarkets. You walk in, planning to grab a loaf of bread, and before you know it, you're walking out with 3 extra things you never planned on buying. How? Store layouts are deliberately designed to guide your movements, steering you toward impulse purchases while making you believe you're shopping freely. But the illusion of choice doesn't just exist in retail. It shapes our opinions, beliefs, and even our behaviors. Ever noticed how political debates always boil down to 2 opposing sides? You're told you must pick one or the other, when in reality, the framework of the argument was already set before you got involved. By limiting the choices, the person in control ensures that no matter which option you pick, the outcome still serves their agenda. Marketers use this trick constantly. A company might offer 3 pricing tiers for a product: one cheap, one expensive, and one just right in the middle. Most people choose the middle option, thinking they've made a rational decision, but that middle price point was strategically placed to push you toward it. You were never really choosing freely. You were being nudged in a specific direction. This concept is even more sinister when it's used in personal relationships. Ever had someone say, "You can either do this my way or we can end things"? That's not a real choice. That's control disguised as compromise. It forces you to accept a limited set of options, making you feel like you had agency when in reality, you were trapped from the start. The illusion of choice thrives on the assumption that having some options equals true freedom. But real freedom isn't just picking from a list. It's questioning who made the list in the first place. The scariest part? The best manipulators don't need to take away your choices. They just need to make you believe you had control all along. Love bombing. At first, it feels like something out of a movie. The attention is intoxicating. The affection is overwhelming. You've finally found someone who sees you, really sees you. They flood you with compliments, send constant texts, tell you you're special, that they've never met anyone like you. It's intense, exhilarating, almost too perfect. And that's because it is. This is love bombing, a psychological trick designed to make someone emotionally dependent before pulling the rug out from under them. It's not about genuine affection. It's a setup, a carefully crafted illusion. Love bombing works by hijacking the brain's reward system. When someone floods you with extreme positivity, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter involved in addiction. It's a high, an emotional rush that feels impossible to walk away from. And that's exactly the point. In relationships, it might look like extravagant gifts, rushing intimacy, or intense declarations of love after only a few days. In friendships or workplaces, it's an instant connection, relentless praise, and flattery that feels almost surreal. But the real trick isn't in the excess, it's in the reversal. Because once the victim is hooked, the withdrawal begins. The good morning texts stop, the warmth fades, the compliments turn into cold indifference, or worse, criticism. Suddenly, the person who made you feel like the most special person in the world pulls away, leaving you scrambling to understand what went wrong. And here's where the real manipulation happens. Instead of recognizing the pattern, the victim blames themselves. They analyze every conversation, lower their boundaries, and work harder to fix what they think they did wrong. They chase the affection, not realizing that the honeymoon phase was never real to begin with. This cycle, intense affection followed by sudden emotional starvation, is a psychological trap. It's called intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling so addictive. The victim never knows when the affection will return, so they keep chasing it, tolerating worse and worse treatment, just for another hit of that early euphoria. It's a tactic used by narcissists in relationships, by cult leaders to keep followers obedient, even by toxic workplaces to manipulate employees into loyalty. The unpredictability creates an emotional roller coaster, where the victim is so focused on regaining the high that they don't realize how much control they've lost. By the time they see the pattern, it's already too late. They're exhausted, isolated, doubting their own instincts. Fear-mongering. Fear is the oldest form of control. It overrides logic, crushes independent thought, and turns people into willing followers. When someone is afraid, they don't analyze, they don't question. They just want to feel safe. And that's what makes fear-mongering and anxiety induction one of the most dangerous psychological tricks ever used. History is filled with examples of fear being weaponized to control entire populations. One of the most infamous, the Salem witch trials. In the late 1600s, paranoia gripped an entire town. People believed witches were lurking among them, hiding in plain sight. The fear became so overwhelming that neighbors turned against neighbors, accusations spread like wildfire, and logic ceased to exist. People confessed to crimes they never committed just to avoid execution, and those who didn't confess, they were sentenced to death anyway. Fear didn't just manipulate them, it made them destroy themselves. And you don't need a witch hunt for this trick to work. It happens everywhere. A manipulative boss keeps employees terrified of losing their jobs, so they never complain. An abusive partner convinces someone the world outside is dangerous, so they never leave. Politicians and media outlets use fear constantly, telling people that disaster is imminent, their way of life is under attack, and only one person, one system, one ideology can protect them. And the more afraid you are, the more control they have. This works because fear hijacks the brain. When you're anxious, your amygdala, the part of the brain that processes threats, goes into survival mode. Logical thinking shuts down, and you become hyper-focused on avoiding danger. In that moment, whoever offers you a way out, whether it's a leader, a product, or a belief system, becomes the person you cling to for security. This is why fear-based marketing is so effective. Ads don't just sell products, they sell protection. Without this cream, you'll age faster. Without this insurance, you'll be ruined. Without this security system, you won't be safe in your own home. The fear is planted, and the solution is immediately presented. The most terrifying part: fear-driven manipulation doesn't feel like manipulation. It doesn't come with a warning label. It feels like concern, like preparation, like a necessary precaution. But if someone is constantly feeding your fears, keeping you anxious, and offering themselves as the only solution, step back and ask why. Because the moment fear stops being a warning and starts being a leash, someone else is holding the other end. Guilt tripping. There's a way to control someone without force, without threats, without a single raised voice. You don't have to argue, persuade, or command. All you have to do is make them feel guilty. Guilt tripping and shame inducement are some of the most powerful psychological weapons, capable of turning people into puppets without them ever realizing it. The victim believes they're acting out of free will, when in reality, their emotions are being manipulated like strings on a marionette. Think about it. How many times have you done something, not because you wanted to, but because you felt bad if you didn't? Maybe you agreed to a favor even though you were exhausted. Maybe you apologized for something that wasn't your fault. Maybe you stayed in a toxic relationship because leaving would make you feel like a terrible person. That's guilt tripping in action, and it's terrifyingly effective. The trick is simple. First, the manipulator plants the seed of guilt, subtly twisting reality to make the victim feel responsible for their suffering. A parent sighs, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me." A friend says, "I guess I just don't matter to you anymore." A partner says, "I sacrificed so much for this relationship, and you're just going to walk away?" None of these statements directly tell the victim what to do. They don't have to. The guilt does all the work. But guilt alone isn't always enough. That's where shame inducement comes in. Guilt makes you feel bad about something you did. Shame makes you feel bad about who you are. It's not, "You forgot my birthday." It's, "You're a terrible friend." It's not, "You made a mistake at work." It's, "You're completely incompetent." When someone internalizes shame, they stop fighting back. They don't just feel like they did something wrong. They feel like they are wrong. And that is the ultimate form of control. Cult leaders, abusive partners, manipulative bosses, they all use this tactic to break people down, to make them easier to control. If you can convince someone that they are inherently flawed, that they owe you something, that they are never quite good enough, then they will spend their lives trying to prove otherwise. They will stay in situations they should leave, agree to things they don't want, and chase approval that will never truly be given. But here's the scariest part. Guilt tripping doesn't just come from other people. We learn to do it to ourselves. We hear these voices so often that they become part of our own inner dialogue. I shouldn't say no. I should be a better person. I don't deserve to be happy. And once someone starts shaming themselves, the manipulation is complete. They no longer need anyone else to control them. So how do you break free? The first step is recognizing the pattern. Ask yourself, are you doing something because you truly want to, or because you're afraid of being seen as selfish, ungrateful, or a disappointment? Are you accepting blame that isn't yours? Are you constantly trying to earn approval that keeps moving just out of reach? Once you start questioning the guilt, you strip it of its power. Because the truth is, no one else gets to decide your worth. And the moment you stop playing their game, the spell is broken. Emotional blackmail. This psychological trick is so powerful that it can make people betray their values, stay in toxic relationships, and feel trapped in their own lives. It's not hypnosis. It's not mind control. It's something worse. And the scariest part, most people don't even realize it's happening to them. Picture this. A mother tells her child, "If you leave me and move away, I don't know how I'll survive." A partner says, "If you really loved me, you wouldn't question me." A friend warns, "After everything I've done for you, you owe me." These aren't just guilt trips, they're calculated forms of control. This is emotional blackmail, a psychological manipulation tactic where someone exploits your emotions, fear, guilt, and obligation to get what they want. They don't ask. They don't force. Instead, they make you feel like denying them is cruel, selfish, even dangerous. And before you know it, you're doing things you never wanted to do because saying no feels impossible. And this trick isn't just used by individuals. Entire groups and movements have been built on emotional blackmail. Take organized crime. Mob bosses have used this tactic for decades. A perfect example, the mafia. They don't just rely on threats of violence. They manipulate loyalty, family ties, and unspoken debts to keep members obedient. A small favor is granted, an act of generosity extended. But there's an unspoken rule. Refusing to reciprocate is betrayal. The idea of walking away isn't just dangerous. It's made to feel morally wrong. That's how deep emotional blackmail can go. But it doesn't take a crime syndicate to use this trick. It happens everywhere. In relationships, where one partner constantly threatens to leave if they don't get their way. In families, where one person controls everyone else through outbursts and silent treatment. At work, where employees are made to feel guilty for setting boundaries. And it always follows a pattern. First, the manipulator makes a demand, subtle or direct. They want something from you, but instead of asking, they set a trap. Next, they trigger guilt, fear, or obligation. Maybe they act hurt. Maybe they explode in anger. Maybe they withdraw affection. Finally, they offer you a way out. If you just do what I say, everything will be fine. And just like that, you're trapped. Not because you can't say no, but because it feels like saying no will destroy everything. So how do you break free? It starts with recognition. If someone makes you feel like your emotions are being used against you, step back. If setting a boundary results in threats, guilt-tripping, or emotional punishment, you're being manipulated. And the key to breaking free isn't arguing, justifying, or explaining. It's refusing to play the game. And here's the chilling truth. Emotional blackmailers don't want love, fairness, or respect. They want control. And the moment they realize they can't control you anymore, they either escalate their tactics or move on to their next victim.